Hi, Vinil. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to talk with you about dashboards and KPIs that business owners need to be focusing on. To kick things off here, why don't you tell us just a little bit about who you work with, how you help business owners, and about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks for having me. It's nice to speak with you both. I am Vinil Ramchandran. I'm an M&A advisor and business broker based in Southern California. I'm based out of Long Beach, California, and I work with mostly retiring business owners, primarily in the manufacturing distribution space and some, B2B service companies. Work with businesses throughout California, and these owners are, initially typically founders that have built their company from scratch. They worked for decades, and now they have what's perhaps their largest asset, and they're ready to liquidate when it's time to go sell. I shouldn't say liquidate, but they're ready to cash in on their years or decades of hard work, right? So that's where we come in. We help them take the business to market, find the right buyer, essentially play matchmaker, and hand the business off to the right person that's going to take the legacy and continue it and grow it to the next level. Along with that, on the exit planning side, we don't necessarily sell any exit planning services, but we incorporate a lot of exit planning methodology in helping clients prepare their business for a sale. Because quite often we run into people that want to sell, but the business is not just ready to take to market. And that's where exit planning comes in to help do certain things to build the value up so you can get the exit you want 2 years, 5 years down the road. And that's what we do to help clients.
So one of the things we're really excited to get your take on is we've been doing a series where we're talking about KPIs and what business owners should really be looking at when it comes to monitoring their business, managing their business. In our world, it shows up as a business dashboard. But when we're talking about what owners should be measuring in order to really garner that success and see where they are, what in your experience do you find are some of the things that maybe they're measuring that they shouldn't be?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point, because you need to have some good measurement systems in place. And I think of measurement as part of what I would call robust business systems, right? When you're thinking about selling a company, you need to have a system that can be transitioned over to a buyer, and the buyer needs to have reasonable confidence that the system's going to continue. It's not overly reliant on the owner. There's a team in place that can run it. There's a system in place, and there's going to be some continuity with the business. So, the thing that people like to measure always is, especially on the marketing side, it's sales, right? How are my sales doing? And that's the end result, which is great, but you got to focus on the inputs that's going to get you the desired result. Often we talk to owners about, hey, what's your forecast? What do you think this business is going to do at the end of this fiscal year or next fiscal year? And quite often, especially with smaller businesses where the systems aren't quite as professionalized, there's just no answers. Like, well, I don't know. I mean, this month's doing great. Our sales is X, and seems similar to last year, so maybe I'll end up the same way. And there's really no proper tracking. Mm-hmm. And I always look at leading indicators. Right? What are the leading indicators that drive your revenue, obviously, but also your inputs that go into revenue, right? All your marketing. If it's on the marketing side, you're looking at the leads coming in, your customer acquisition costs, depending, it's going to vary based on business to business. But, your visitors to your website, your social media engagement, all of these things are going to have a net result in terms of bringing in more leads that your sales team can then go out and close and generate revenue. And people that have an established marketing department perhaps have some of these things under control, but there's just a lot of small business owners that just can't afford to have a marketing department per se, right? And it's not just marketing. The same thing applies to other areas of the business. We work with a lot of manufacturing, and you see things like overall equipment effectiveness, downtime on your equipment, the yield, the throughput on your production, right? Defect rate in terms of quality. And sometimes they're forced to implement these systems because companies, they go and get certification like ISO 9000 or AS 9100, depending on what industry they're in. And so they have certain systems in place to produce and maintain certain quality and safety aspects of their business. But when it comes to marketing, especially in the manufacturing sector, we see a lot of companies that built their business just through years of hard work and relationships, and the charm and personality of the owner, where they have great relationships with clients and they continue to get repeat business. I've even had owners tell me, hey, why do I need to worry about marketing? Because I sell it to dealers and distributors. The same ones keep buying from me year after year. And it's their job to go sell. And my message is always, listen, when they go and try to sell it and someone enters their dealership looking at your product sitting next to another competitor's product, they're going to pull out their cell phones and Google your brand. And if they find a bunch of positive stuff about your competitors' products and they don't see much about yours, you're at a disadvantage. You're making your dealer's job harder. And the dealer doesn't care if the customer buys this product or that product. They're still getting their revenue. So the more you invest in your marketing, the more successful your dealers and distributors are going to be, and the more you're going to succeed as part of that process. So I guess I know that's perhaps a little bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that kind of gets to the point.
Yeah, I'd love to add kind of a second part to that question. So you talked a lot about the being able to really track those leading indicators in marketing and across the business. Tell us what a buyer thinks when they see a business kind of comparing someone who's just sort of grown by luck and relationships versus someone that can show those leading indicators, can provide a model of what they're doing, that a buyer could potentially, extrapolate, well, if I'm to put this additional capital into the system, what could be my outcomes? Can you kind of talk about from the buyer's point of view, how they look at those businesses and value them differently?
Yeah, that's a significant fear factor for buyers. If they come into a business and it seems like the entire enterprise is based on this owner's relationship with clients, there's a significant risk there, because what happens when the owner walks out the door? And as we know with business, even if the same clients have been doing business for X number of years, there's always competitors knocking on your customers' doors trying to pitch them. And of course, if they're doing business with Heather and Randy and they like you guys and they're going to stay just because they have that long-term relationship and they know you and they trust you and they don't want to kick you out for no good reason. When there's a change and the buyer comes in, there's that risk, right? Hey, is this the opportunity for them to go with the other competitor that's been promising them a lower price and saying, try me out for all these years? And, fortunately, I think the fear tends to be overblown sometimes, because, we don't often see businesses transitioning and all of a sudden customers just disappearing. That rarely happens. I mean, if you're providing good service and you're taking care of them and there's a smooth transition, you make the appropriate introduction, things tend to continue for the most part, but it's still a fear factor, right? A buyer has to assume what if. They're always thinking, when you're signing a personal guarantee on a bank note and putting in every last penny you have towards a down payment, those are valid concerns that any buyers are going to ask. So anything the seller can do to set up a robust system that's not entirely dependent on them, and a system that's going to reasonably continue, it gives the buyer more confidence, and it's an easier transition, right? Like when it's time to train and transition the company, you can't just hand the buyer the keys and say, hey, good luck. You have to spend some time helping them. And if you have systems incorporated, it's much easier for them to train. And most sellers want to sell and, get on that cruise and go off to Alaska or wherever they want to go. They don't want to have to hang around for 6 months or 12 months holding the buyer's hand and coaching them through every single aspect. Some people are okay with doing that, but especially most retiring owners, they want to be done when they're done, right? And of course, you can't walk out on day one after closing, but the better the systems are, the faster you can leave, because the buyer's going to come in. It's easier to train them. They feel comfortable. And after a couple of weeks, they're like, hey, go off on your vacation. I'm good. I'll call you if I have any questions.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Vinil, in your experience, it can definitely be an emotional journey for the business owner. And, it's easy sometimes for them to really focus on metrics and data. And that's certainly something that we can help take care of with a business dashboard. But there's also the emotional side of it. What are some ways that you work with your clientele to kind of connect the emotional side of it and that data and outcome-based side of it, so that it kind of has a better flow for the business owners as they're on this transition journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a business transition can definitely be very emotional, right? The way it usually works is There's this initial excitement about, hey, I'm going to do something new. I'm selling a company for the first time. I'm planning my retirement, or I'm planning whatever the next phase of their life is going to be. But a lot of times we see that people really haven't put a lot of thought into that, right? They like the idea of exiting and cashing out, and they're already seeing big, a large number of zeros on a check in their bank, and
Probably more zeros than is realistic.
so, often that's the case.
Little ambitious,
Right.
35 times instead of 10x.
Oh, gosh.
Exactly, that does happen. So people, there's an initial level of enthusiasm. It's a new project. It's exciting. Now, these processes can take quite a bit of time, right? Selling a business is not like selling a timeshare where you say, hey, sign here today, this deal won't be here tomorrow, and you lock up a buyer with the 1 hour seminar. These things can take several months. A buyer has a due diligence period. They make an offer. They get their accountants and lawyers and everybody else involved with analyzing the company. There are lenders involved usually that need to do their own due diligence. So it can be a long process. And business owners, often they're drivers. They like to get things done, and they're not used to having a lengthy process where it's really invasive, right? These small business owners are used to being private. They don't want to share their information with anybody other than the IRS and their accountant. And now you're having to provide tax returns and bank statements, and you had to answer every single question about everything that took place with the buyer, the buyer's lender, the appraiser. You get multiple people involved.
Yeah.
And it's really it's like you're opening the kimono, right? I mean, it's you're fully exposed and you're not used to that. So there's some emotional turmoil that comes in through the process, the length of the process, the amount of questions that comes in. Sometimes it becomes a tough negotiation process where the seller feels like they're being nickeled and dimed by a buyer. Some buyers like to do that, right? And that's where it's a bit of a process. The seller needs to be mentally prepared to go through that process. And they usually need a team on their side to help them with that process, because a lot of buyers, especially if you're dealing with larger strategic buyers, private equity firms, these people are experienced business buyers. They've done these transactions before, sometimes many, many times. They're experts, and they still come to the table with a team of advisors, right? And sometimes sellers don't quite understand that you need to, not go to a gunfight with a knife. You need to have a team that can help you play it on an even playing field with these big, sophisticated strategic buyers. And if they're doing this process well and they have good advisors on their side, usually they can work through the process, especially if they have a good business. It's all doable and achievable at the end. But the seller does need to be prepared for that emotional turmoil, because there's times when they're excited, there's times when they're feeling frustrated and they're feeling down. And one of the most important things we advise sellers to do through that exit planning process is to really think about the next phase of their life and be at peace with that, right? Whether they want to go golfing or spend time with the grandkids or start another venture or whatever the case may be. There's no right or wrong answers, but they have to be at peace with that, because their identity as a business owner is really, really tied to this particular business, and that's going to change, right? Yeah. And it's not a bad thing, but they have to get comfortable with that and not see retirement as a bad word. So that's kind of our advice to sellers generally, and people that embrace that and spend some time thinking through it typically do a lot better through the process. The ones that don't, sometimes you end up at the last minute at the closing table and you start seeing a little bit of seller's remorse. Well, maybe I should wait for a couple more years, right? I mean, it's really a good idea. What am I going to do Monday morning when I don't have a business anymore? And it takes some preparation.
Definitely. Sure. So one last question to kind of wrap things up here. If you have a business owner who really wants to do a good job of planning over the next couple of years to get ready to sell, if you could just have them focusing on one metric or KPI in their business, one leading indicator, what would that one thing be that you really want them to focus on and work towards?
So the value of a business is generally tied to their earnings, right? Mm-hmm. So if they could go and drive their profitability up, that's going to get them the biggest increase in value. There's a ton of other things, and we often talk about like 9 different key value drivers, but without going into all of them, if they were to just focus on one thing, it's you got to go drive your bottom line. And in order to drive your bottom line, you need to drive your top line, right? You probably need you can only cut expenses so much. You're not going to work your way to prosperity just by reducing a few expenses. Most of these small business owners tend to be pretty tight on the expense side for the most part. The bigger opportunity is driving their revenue. And in order to do that, you do need to revamp your marketing plan. If you've been stagnant and you've been doing things a certain way and you've been satisfied with the customer base you have, you're going to need to shake things up. And we definitely recommend they bring outside assistance with that, because sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees, right? And if you've been doing things a certain way and you're satisfied with your customer base, and we see clients where they really don't want more clients. I've had a client that their website's been down for like a year and a half, and they don't and they don't want to fix it because they don't want any more customers, right? Because they feel they're at capacity. Why do I need any more customers? But here's the problem with that. You may be maxed out on your capacity, but when I see your profitability is half of what other similar businesses with similar revenue have, what that tells me is you don't have the strength on the pricing side, right? And you're afraid to go raise your prices to your customers. As much as I hate, receiving price increases as a customer from a business standpoint, you have to be priced appropriately, right? Otherwise, you're selling a low margin business that's going to be less attractive to a buyer. So you may not need more customers, but what you need is better quality customers. And you need to be in a position where you can tell your customers, hey, listen, we're barely making any money on your account, especially those low margin accounts. I'm going to have to bump you up X%. And if that's unaffordable, I'm going to have to give you some time to find another vendor, and we're going to have to go find someone else. And in order to do that, you can only do that if you have a pipeline and a marketing system that's generating clients. So you have some clients to choose from. You can't do it if you're at the mercy of the handful of clients that you currently have. So that's usually our advice. And quite often we'll advise them to go bring in a fractional CMO or a fractional sales leader, and depending on what their needs are, and assist them with that process, because they understand the message of their company, but the perception from the customers and the messaging and the branding and everything may not align in the best possible way. So I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity, and I can see where the service that you guys provide would be very helpful for business owners.
Well, Vinil, thank you so much for your insight. Definitely appreciate it, and a lot of wisdom there for business owners. And if someone wanted to get in contact with you to learn more about how you could support them through that journey, what is the best way for them to do so?
They can go to our website, dreambusinessbrokers.com. You see the sign there, Dream Business Brokers. My email is Vinil, VINIL, @dreambusinessbrokers.com, or they can simply call at 562-761-4689.
Easy enough. Thank you so much, Vinil.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you both very much. Have a good one.
You too.